The United States in the late 1940s. World War II has ended and Howard Unruh returns from the battlefields of Europe to his hometown of Camden, New Jersey, where he would live with his mother and study the Bible. That would be until one day in 1949 when he picked up the Luger that he'd brought back from Germany as a keepsake and start upon a murderous rampage that would become known as the Walk of Death. Growing up, Howard Barton Unruh was said to be an incredibly shy and unremarkable boy. His 1939 high school yearbook stating his ambition was to become a government employee. With the United States entering into World War II, 21-year-old Unruh's plans soon changed, with him enlisting into the United States Army on October 27, 1942. During his service, he became a tank gunner in the 342nd Armoured Field Artillery and participated in battles across Italy, France, Austria, Belgium and of course Germany, all of which were considered to be the conflict's deadliest zones. For this, he received the European Theatre of Operations Medal, the Victory Medal and the Good Conduct Medal. Despite his stellar service, Unruh's section chief noted that he displayed a disturbing passion for guns and marksmanship, as well as for keeping meticulous notes on the enemies that he killed on the battlefield. Unruh was honourably discharged after the war and returned to New Jersey, where his mother lived. However, his relationship with his family quickly deteriorated, with his younger brother Jim later claiming that his military service had changed him drastically. Unruh decided to enroll in the Temple University School of Pharmacy in Philadelphia. Dropping out after just 1 month, he claimed that he found it difficult to adjust to life as a college student due to his poor physical condition. He went back to New Jersey but failed to find employment. Living off his mother's meagre income as a worker in a nearby soap factory, Unruh spent his days reading the Bible and pottering about the house. He also amassed a small collection of pistols, knives and bullets and converted their basement into a target range where he frequently went to practice shooting. His actions unnerved his neighbours, in particular Morris Cohen and his family, who lived next door and owned a small drugstore located below the apartment building. They regarded Unruh as a religious nut, a remark that he hated and perceived to be derogatory. Comments like this only served to fuel his anger towards his neighbours. He complained that the Cohens frequently shortchanged him and that a shoemaker who lived in the block buried his trash too near their property. His deteriorating relationships with his neighbours came to a head in the early morning hours of September 6, 1949, when Unruh, disappointed after a disastrous date with a man, arrived home to find that a fence that he had recently installed had been removed. It may have been a small and even petty insult, but for him, it was the last straw in a long list of grievances that he had against the Cohens. According to Smithsonian Magazine, quote, for a couple of years Unruh had been contemplating killing several of his Kramer Hill neighbours over petty squabbles, perceived slights and name-calling, all of which fed into his psychosis. Unruh thought the world was out to get him, so he decided to enact revenge on his little corner of it. Unruh was awakened at around 7 a.m. by his mother, who had prepared him a breakfast of fried eggs and milk. In response, he held a wrench above her head threateningly, which caused her to flee to a neighbour's home. Frida Unruh would still be there an hour later when gunshots rang out across the block. Fearing that her son was somehow involved in it, she reportedly fainted. Unfortunately, her mother's instinct wasn't wrong. After eating breakfast, Unruh had armed himself with a 6-inch knife and tear gas pen that contained 6 shells. He also encased a German Luger pistol that he secured with 2 clips and 33 loose cartridges, which he felt would be enough to kill his intended targets. Aside from the pharmacist Morris Cohen, he also planned to shoot the barber Clark Hoover and tailor Thomas Zagrino and the shoemaker John Pilachik, all of whom were neighbours that he believed had been mocking him behind his back. With that, the lanky 28-year-old Howard Unruh, dressed in a brown suit and heavily armed, walked out of his family's home and into the shoemaker's store, where he callously shot 27-year-old Pilachik twice while a young child hid behind the counter. He then went inside the barber shop next door, where 6-year-old Oris Smith was sat on a hobby horse having his hair cut by Unruh's next target, Clark Hoover. Unruh shot and killed them both. Upon exiting the barber shop, Unruh fired at a boy in a window and into a tavern located across the street, which was owned by Frank Engel. Fortunately, he missed both times. This did nothing to deter him, though. Unruh's main targets were the Cohens, and he headed to the drugstore where 45-year-old insurance salesman named James Hutton was exiting the establishment. Unruh asked Hutton to excuse him, but he didn't move fast enough for Unruh, who shot and killed him. Upon hearing the gunshots, the Cohens had attempted to flee to their upstairs apartment with 38-year-old Rose, putting their son, 12-year-old Charles, inside a closet before locking herself in an adjacent one. However, Unruh managed to gain access to the room they were hiding in and shot 3 times into the door of Rose's hiding place before opening the broken door and firing into her face. He also shot and killed her mother-in-law, 63-year-old Minnie, before confronting 40-year-old Morris on a porch roof, shooting him in the back, which caused him to fall to the pavement below. His death and the massacre of his family failed to quench Unruh's thirst for blood. He left the drugstore and walked out into the middle of the road, causing a passing car to slow for fear of hitting him. He walked up to the vehicle and shot at its driver, killing 24-year-old television repairman and war veteran Alvin Day. Unruh then made his way to the tailor shop where he hoped to find Thomas Zagrino. Instead, he found Tom's wife, 28-year-old Helga Zagrino, who got down on her knees to beg for her life, but to no avail. He made his way to the local food store. Finding it locked, he shot inside but failed to hit anyone. Enraged, he made his way to a car, stopped at the intersection and shot its occupants, killing 37-year-old Helen Wilson and her 68-year-old mother, Emma Matlack. Helen's son, 9-year-old John, who had been sitting in the back seat, was injured too after a bullet lodged in his neck. Unfortunately, his wounds were too severe and he later died in hospital. He then shot blindly at someone he thought he saw in an apartment window, the bullet instantly killing 2-year-old Thomas Hamilton. His caregiver, Irene Rice, collapsed upon witnessing the shooting and later being treated for a severe shock. He again shot at a car coming down the street, but the occupants managed to escape to a nearby tavern. By this point, Unruh was nearly out of ammunition and, hearing sirens in the distance, decided to call it a day. He broke into the home of 36-year-old Madeline Harry and her son, 16-year-old Armand, both of whom he severely injured. He then retreated back to his own apartment where he sat and waited as the police closed in. A gunfight ensued, during which a journalist by the name of Philip Buxton managed to find Unruh's phone number. He called it and Unruh answered. "Is this Howard?" "Yes. What's the last name of the party you want?" "Unruh." "What's the last name of the party you want?" "Unruh. I'm a friend and I want to know what they're doing to you." "They're not doing a damn thing to me, but I'm doing plenty to them." "How many have you killed?" "I don't know yet because I haven't counted them, but it looks like a pretty good score." "Why are you killing people?" "I don't know. I can't answer that yet. I'm too busy." At that point, Buxton heard Unruh move away from the phone as gunfire was heard in the background. "I'll have to talk to you later. A couple of friends are coming to get me." At the time, no standard police protocol had been put in place for dealing with this kind of situation, leading the authorities to haphazardly fire at Unruh's apartment building using a combination of machine guns, shotguns and pistols. They also threw 2 tear gas canisters into the complex, which forced him to surrender. 2 armed officers entering the building, shouting to Unruh to come down with his hands up. He replied, "I give up, don't shoot," and with that he fell down the stairs, landing at the officers' feet. As he was patted down and cuffed by police officers, one asked him if he was a psychopath. In response, Unruh calmly said, quote, "I am no psycho. I have a good mind." But the killing spree that he had just committed seemed to say otherwise. In the space of 20 minutes, Howard Unruh had killed 13 people and severely injured 4 in what has come to be known as the Walk of Death. During his interrogation, Unruh reportedly admitted to the killings and even supplied the authorities with helpful details. His interview was cut short though when blood was found on his seat. He had received a bullet wound either from the shootout with the police or when one bar owner returned fire during his rampage. Unruh was treated for his wound, then voluntarily transferred to Trenton Psychiatric Hospital, where he was placed in the ward reserved for criminally insane patients. The following weeks would see him interviewed and examined by teams of psychiatrists, all of whom attempted to understand why an otherwise unremarkable war veteran had embarked on a killing spree. Their reports were concealed from the public eye and were only released half a century later in 2012. According to Smithsonian Magazine, quote, "He cold-bloodedly explained everything, listing the neighbours who had wronged him and describing each murder with little emotion. He claimed to feel sorrow for the children he'd killed, but the doctor's notes indicate he didn't seem remorseful. Unruh went so far as to say that murder is a sin and I should get the chair. He would never face the electric chair or time in prison. Instead, psychologists diagnosed him as suffering with paranoid schizophrenia and found him to be criminally insane. So on October 20th, 1949, a judge signed an order of commitment based on the diagnosis, and Unruh was interned at Trenton Psychiatric Hospital with his father, Sam, paying the required fee of $15 a month for his upkeep. He was also regularly visited by his mother, Frida, until she passed away in 1985. In 1993, an elderly Unruh was transferred to the facility's geriatric unit, which had fewer restrictions. He lived out his days there and died at age 88 on October 19, 2009, 60 years after his tragic walk of death. His last public words while being interviewed by a psychologist were, "I'd have killed 1,000 if I had enough bullets." Many contemporary experts believe that Unruh's diagnosis was a farce, and that he would have been found legally sane had he committed his killing spree today. Regardless of whether he was genuinely insane, Howard Unruh's actions on the morning of September 6, 1949 were a dark foreshadowing of the tragic mass shootings that would plague America in years to come. In a strange twist of fate, in 2018, student Carly Novell survived a mass shooting at her Parkland High School by hiding in a closet. Her grandfather was none other than Charles Cohen, the boy who had survived Unruh's rampage by also hiding in a closet many years earlier. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is probably as close as we're going to get to a happy ending on this episode. But thank you for sticking with it. You've done your species proud. Right then, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.